You're listening to 90.7 FM WKGC, Panama City.
From WKGC Public Media, this is ReelTalk, the place where you can join the cinematic conversations frame by frame each week. I'm your host, R.L. Terry. If movies are your thing, give us a ring, 850-772-6803 to join the discussion on air, or you can text the show at 850-329-8936. Here we have a screenplay that should have been exorcised of the demons plaguing its narrative. Today we are reviewing The Conjuring: Last Rites, now in cinemas nationwide. The final installment in the Warren saga offers initial intrigue and a moderately compelling performative dimension, but what substance the story had was undercut by a proliferation of monstrous encounters and vapid CGI. Joining me today is returning guest and friend of the show, film critic and award-winning musician, Gino Sassani. Welcome back to the show, Gino.
Good to have you back. Oh, good to be back. Not to have you back. Sorry about that. I'm here.
Always wonderful to have you on. Gino is the editor-in-chief of UpcomingDisc.com, a member of the Southeastern Film Critics Association, and board member of the Critics Association of Central Florida, of which I, too, am a member. Before we dive into this latest and billed as the final installment in the saga of Ed and Lorraine Warren, probably the most notable and famous, or infamous, depending upon your opinion, paranormal investigators and demonologists in history, Gino, let's go back to 2013, when the first Conjuring film was released, and the highs and lows since then. Looking back at 12 years of these movies, what have you thought about the franchise?
Well, I mean, the low point was so obviously that second Annabelle film, which was absolutely horrible.
The second,
Annabelle Comes Home or whatever it is.
Oh no, that's the third one. No, the second one is the excellent one. The third one.
Then I missed one of those in there. There have been so many of them that I missed one in there, but I remember that being just a horrible film.
Yeah.
And there's too much Annabelle. I mean, I think that's been the problem. And even in this film, Annabelle makes her appearance, and I don't think it's a coincidence that one of the cast members sort of looks like Annabelle, and I think that's not a coincidence. But that to me was the low point, is the Annabelle thing. The nun thing, that wasn't very, very high on my list of enjoyable things either. But the first Conjuring film, I think, was a bit groundbreaking. It was a different way to look at these things, and I liked it, but it wore on me, I think, pretty quickly, I'd have to say. I'm not a huge fan of the franchise.
Yeah. It's hit or miss for me too, Gino. More miss than hit. High points for me are one of the films you already mentioned, The Conjuring, the original one from 2013. It was atmospheric. It was thoughtful. Excellent character development. It was a character-driven film. It wasn't plot-driven, and it was not reliant upon the monster scenes, the demon scenes. In fact, one of the best moments is that hand clap. And so that's one of the best moments from the film. And like it, I think Annabelle Creation, very high point. I may like Annabelle Creation even more than the first Conjuring. Annabelle Creation is the second film, and that one is incredibly strong. A lot of people I've talked to over time really enjoy Annabelle Creation, and it is Annabelle Creation specifically because it too was more of a I'd say character-driven piece than it was plot-driven. It also has some excellent scares in it as well. Looking back over the franchise, I'd like to say we have highs and lows, and we do. The lows definitely seem to outnumber the high points in the franchise. But
I agree with that.
But anyone that hasn't seen Annabelle Creation, don't let the first Annabelle dissuade you from watching it. Annabelle Creation is an excellent horror film, and I rewatched it on the big screen a few years ago when it got a re-release, and it was still terrifying. And so even though I knew everything that was going to happen from the first act, the film establishes this tense, unsettling atmosphere that rarely lets up, very similar to the original Conjuring. And at the time it came out in 2017, it had been quite a while since a horror film genuinely scared me. That one was directed by David F. Sandberg. And what I liked about what he did is he knew how to work within the broader Conjuring universe while still crafting a story that feels self-contained and fresh. And that's missing from a lot of these other films. In total, we have 10 films in the Conjuring universe. And I got to ask you a question, Gino.
Yeah.
Did you know that the Curse of La Llorona was part of the Conjuring verse?
I'm not sure if I knew that. I mean, I know that I've known that recently. I don't know that I knew that all along. I'm trying to remember.
Or maybe it was just La Llorona. It's because there was two that came out at the same time. I may be confusing the titles, but I didn't know that La Llorona was part of it. But but in prepping for the show today, it came up as being part of the Conjuring universe. And
I've heard that, but I don't think I knew that all along. So I don't know if I can confirm that because I've only heard that. I've never seen anybody officially tell me that.
So, and something interesting that listeners who may enjoy the franchise by and large may want to do is there are lists online that have the movies in story order. Not release date order, story order, which starts with The Nun, and then Annabelle Creation is actually the second one, all the way up to today's film, The Conjuring Last Rites. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go throughout the show today, reflecting upon the franchise, but it started off very strong, and then it was this precipitous decline, momentary greatness with Annabelle Creation in 17, and then all the way back down until we get to, like, The Nun 2, which was none too interesting to me.
Yeah.
So it's unlike some of the other horror franchises out there that are kind of consistently good or good-ish, it's one that really seems to be all over the map, and maybe that's because they're just kind of it's a slapdash way of just kind of shoehorning all these movies into one another. But I was hoping that we were going to finish on a high note. I was hoping for another Annabelle Creation, but for me it turned out to be another Annabelle. So it's kind of sad to see some great actors get sent off like that. But listeners, if you missed it at the top of the hour, today we are reviewing the new horror movie The Conjuring Last Rites, starring Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson, also featuring Mia Tomlinson and Ben Hardy, now in cinemas nationwide. 850-772-6803 to join the discussion on air, or you can text the show at 850-329-8936. For those that may not have seen the movie yet, Gino, what's it all about?
Well, and that's one of the problems about too much. I mean, the film takes us back to what I believe they say was the first demon that they ever met. And, of course, we start out with a young version of the Warrens and encountering this demonic mirror, and she's pregnant. And so then we flash ahead so many years now. We've got a relatively adult daughter, and she's got a boyfriend of her own now, and they're now on another. And there's another case going on that we know, watching the movie, is related, but that they don't know until towards the end, has to do with this mirror. This mirror kind of shows back up again. And, of course, they have this fight to save a family, and that's part of the problem. There's too many characters by the time you get to the end. You've got the Warrens and that extended family. You've got this extended family that's there. There's just so many people in this house, while the final, fight for, good versus evil, takes place. And I think that more what I'm seeing isn't the last Conjuring movie. It looks to me like they're passing the baton.
So you think we're going to continue with the Conjuring verse, but with a different cast?
Well, I think that the daughter. I mean, if you notice at the end, she's kind of got these powers too, and she becomes a big focus of this. And they even, when the couple get together, they even sort of allude to that they're going to go on. And the guy, I don't want to give too much away, but it's almost like Ed passes it on to her husband to be, and so I think what I'm getting out of it is that we're gonna see more of this just without the Warrens. I think we're gonna see the younger couple now.
Yeah. So, before we get into the more details of this film, the devil's in the details, they say.
Yeah, try not to be too giveaway here, but.
So I think we're both kind of on the same level there, Gino. The kind of 20,000-foot level where I like to start on a film is just it's certainly not the worst movie ever, but it's by far one that's going to wind up on many, if any, rewatch lists. And we're going to talk about why that is. So with all that in mind, let's go ahead and dive into the movie here, Gino. The movie begins with a promising atmospheric first act, even measured in the paranormal action and manifestations.
Right.
Where does the film's potential, in your opinion, which is established early, at first I thought, gee, this might actually be pretty good, but then it begins to falter. Where do you think that decline begins?
I think it begins with the second family.
Okay.
I think when the mirror shows up at the second family, I think that, we spend way too much time with these two events being separate, and we're all sitting there going, obviously, how can they not know this is going on? And it's almost like they're finding excuses for the Warrens to be ignoring, this case that's going on. And to me, that just gets to be like, come on, you're taking too long.
Yeah.
Let's get to the action. There's so much of that middle film that we could cut a half an hour out of this film, and I don't know if anybody would notice. I really think people would notice all that time in the middle. So to me, it starts out really strong, like you said, in atmosphere. It doesn't get good to the very, very end where you get the reveals and such. Mm-hmm. But that middle, I just, I don't know. To me, it's snooze fest, man. I don't know how I stayed awake. While this whole thing was going on with the other family and they're, trying to stay away from it, it's like, come on, guys, pull this. It's like the Titanic, well, you hit the iceberg already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it hits it very early on. I like the idea of this very chilling, intimate confrontation with the supernatural at the beginning. The mood, suitably dark. The premise, while familiar, still, at least in the beginning, for me, had enough mystery to draw me in, which would appear to be tapping into this desire to be in some vein as The Exorcist. Of course, we're miles away from hitting that mark.
Yes, we are.
And for a time, the movie even teases the prospect of a measured, more atmospheric entry into the Warren saga. But unfortunately, the promise that the first act, kind of prompts, it just gives way to this chaotic barrage of hollow fights and set pieces and monsters, and that they really just smother any narrative tension that the film may have cultivated there in the first act. It's like it's almost like this is like we got too many writers, or we have like two completely different movies that have somehow been mashed together to create this last Rites. And because you introduce all these other characters, and that is an issue I take with not just horror films. It's just a lot of films in general nowadays have just too many people. There's too many cast members. And I've got a feeling it's because studios are trying to make the movies like literally everybody that's watching this movie can see themselves in some form or fashion in this movie.
But then you have to pay off those
characters. There's too many.
Yeah, you got to pay them off if they're going to be that way.
And you have to develop. If you don't develop them, they become paper.
Right.
And we got an awful lot of paper characters in this movie. A lot of one-dimensional characters, one-dimensional plot, one-dimensional characters. Where is the dimension that we had in 2013's Conjuring, that we had in 2017's Annabelle creation? Because I think in the beginning it sets itself up to be that. And then all of a sudden it turns into like a supernatural episode. And I feel that's where we were going in this film. The return, though, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, whom I love in these roles. They're supported. I like seeing them. They're supported by Mia Tomlinson and Ben Hardy, and I'd say this cast of four: Wilson, Farmiga, Tomlinson, and Hardy. They remain the film's greatest assets, and they're able to bring this emotional authenticity even when the story stumbles. And so, Gino, how crucial are returning actors like Wilson and Farmiga to sustaining a horror franchise's emotional core? And I'd even go further to say, does Mia's Judy and Ben's Tony's, the inclusion of both of them, does that enhance or dilute the family dynamic, which is really critical to the Warrens' emotional resonance? Where are you on those?
Well, where I am, I think they could have very, very heavily enhanced, but I don't think they took advantage of that possibility so much. But of course, having those two, having Wilson and Farmiga there, I think that's important because it's their experiences we're talking about. It's their lifetime of exploration of the paranormal. That's the center of these movies. I don't think that this would have worked without them. So obviously, they're obviously very. And you know what? She brings a very emotional part with this. We're talking about her baby, when she's first having this encounter and it affects her baby. Mothers want to protect their baby. They're tapping into some real primordial, good stuff here. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Judy looks a lot like Annabelle, especially towards the end. I think that they picked an actress who maybe they're trying to make some kind of connection, even though this wasn't really about Annabelle. But of course, we know she kind of shows up. She always shows up.
She always shows up.
And that's the problem. I think they do Annabelle things because I guess they figure fans want to have that glimpse of Annabelle. But I do like the new characters. I think that the new characters added. I don't like all the extra characters, the extra family stuff, but adding the daughter and her boyfriend, I like that. I liked his backstory a lot.
Oh, me too.
And I liked how that came out, in pieces and started to bring things together. And I liked the relationship. I think they had more chemistry than Wilson and Farmiga had.
They had excellent chemistry. I mean, both Farmiga and Wilson, as you stated, Gino, remain the heart of the franchise. They're the soul, if you will, in this otherwise soulless movie. They have great chemistry, but I like what you said about Tomlinson and Hardy. They had excellent chemistry too, maybe even a little bit better chemistry than the good. Not knocking chemistry of Farmiga and Wilson, it's good, but I think what we had between Tomlinson and Hardy might even be a little better, and it is that chemistry which I think kept me from completely tuning out. I like combining Farmiga and Wilson with Tomlinson and Hardy because their collective performances really carry this emotional authenticity that suggests a deeper, more resonant film lurking beneath the surface. Too bad it was kept beneath the surface. But then the supporting players too, moderately compelling turns, some of them, but most of them are one-dimensional, and they weren't given a whole lot of material with which to work.
Yeah, there's just too much going on. Like I said, if you had taken these four characters and made this a more intimate story and a little more isolated story with the four of these and the encounter with the mirror, I think we would have had a better film. Because this whole family and the Dog Day Afternoon media circus that was going on through the whole thing. I mean, I get it, you show that, but we wasted way too much time on that. I saw potential as a very intimate story between the Warrens and of course the child, the daughter and Tony, and that I think would have made a much better movie. I think that they threw too much in there, and if they'd have pulled back and made this a more intimate story, I think this could have been a creepy, very, very emotional horror movie.
Agreed. We learned that Judy has shared with Tony, at least in part, what her family does. But we never really develop, even though the actors have great chemistry, the screenplay doesn't develop the story between them. Like, we have little knowledge of the emotional journey that both of them have gone on. She a little bit more than he, but it's more or less just kind of telling us what she has told him instead of dramatizing it. And so I think had we gotten rid of some of the one-dimensional characters and lean more into cultivating this relationship and then tapping into that primal fear. What's the inspiration for horror films? Well, inspiration horror films are inspired by our most primal fears, and what is more primal than a mother protecting her daughter? So it's there, it's just left to languish on the vine. You're listening to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by returning guest and friend of the show, film critic Gino Sassani. This hour we are talking about The Conjuring, Last Rites, the latest and perhaps final installment, maybe not, in the Ed and Lorraine Warren saga, captured by the Conjuring universe of movies. When we come back, Gino and I will continue our discussion. Have you seen the movie or have questions or comments about it? You can join our discussion on air by calling 850-772-6803, or you can text the show at 850-329-8936. We'll be right back after this break.
WKGC brings you Jazz in a Minor Key, a taste of the ever-evolving jazz scene for your workday afternoon. You'll hear standards along with tracks from contemporary jazz artists. It's your little jazz club on the radio. Jazz in a Minor Key airs Monday through Friday afternoons
at 1 p.m.
on your local public radio station, WKGC 90.7 FM and HD.
After the LA fires burned down its clubhouse, how one Altadena business has partially reopened.
Couldn't have asked for a better weekend, and moving forward, I think the club is hopefully going to be a representation of what's going to happen all throughout Altadena.
I'm Kimberly Adams, how this LA business is building back. Next time on Marketplace.
Weekdays at 5 p.m. on WKGC.
Welcome back to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by returning guest and friend of the show, film critic Gino Sassani. This hour we are talking about The Conjuring Last Rites, the latest and perhaps final installment in the Ed and Lorraine Warren saga, as depicted in the Conjuring universe of movies. Have you seen the movie or have questions about it? You can join our conversation on air by calling 850-772-6803, or you can text the show at 850-329-8936. Building off our topic before the break, Gino, although the lead actors shine, and I'd even go as far as to say that they delivered, moderately compelling performances. The ensemble cast is limited in depth and latitude by this awful screenplay that needs exorcised of demons itself, leaving little room for nuance. So, Gino, how important is it for ensemble casts here in Last Rites and just in horror in general to be deeply developed? And, furthermore, how does that impact the audience's overall emotional investment? What are your thoughts on those questions?
Well, obviously, the more we learn about a person or a character, the more we care about that character, the more danger there is, the more we get into to worrying about their welfare. If we don't know them and we, especially if they come out to be very cardboard, we don't really care what happens to them.
Yeah.
And in this, I don't think it was so much even that problem. In this, I think there was just too darn many of them.
Yeah.
I never really got a sense that I got to know that family that well. I really just never got that sense. And, when things happen to the family, yeah, okay, it's scary things, but I never got invested until the characters that we know showed up. For me, that's when the movie begins at the end.
Yeah.
That middle act is wasted and useless. It's not until we get characters that we actually care about that start to be in danger that we make an investment into the movie. And, that's always been true of me. Otherwise, they're just cannon fodder. Who cares? If you're just going to kill people off, it doesn't matter. But if you get invested in the character, then you get invested in what happens to them.
Yeah, when we look at these characters in any movie, really, but here particularly in horror, if the stakes aren't high enough, or if the character hasn't been, sufficiently developed enough, then it really mitigates our ability to empathize and to care. Any care that we would have for this character rooting for their survival is quickly eroded. When it's like, well, why should I care? If I get rid of them, how does the story change? What changes when this character dies? And that's not only a problem raising the stakes, character development in this movie, but more broadly in horror films. I particularly over the last several years, I'd say 5 to 7 years, where it's the writers and or director are afraid to kill off main characters. And it was established way early on that is how you could hook your audience, kill off a main character. Hitchcock knew it, Wes Craven knew it, others knew it, and yet we're afraid to kill off our main characters. We even have in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, which I know you love. I love it too. Yeah. We kill off it, and it's not a spoiler. The movie's been around for over 40 years. For a long time. Almost 40 years. So, well, actually, next couple years will be 40. Anyway, we kill off Nancy Thompson. I mean, she's our main character, and she's not in the second one. So this is, I'm not going to count Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which is the meta version. Right. I won't count that because she comes back. But as far as
it's not her. It's the actress.
Yes, it's the actress. And so we kill her off. And so then you're like, oh my gosh, they killed off Nancy Thompson. It's the equivalent of killing off Laurie Strode in Halloween. Right. And here we don't. We rarely do that, and one of my biggest problems with the recent Scream movies is you don't kill off any of the main characters, or you have a character that is so badly wounded, they should have died. There's no way, because they are not Bruce Willis and Die Hard, there is no way that they somehow survived this attack. And when the stakes are lowered, it's why care. So where this film falters most egregiously is in its writing, particularly in the second and third acts. We establish what could be a good movie early on, but it soon becomes formulaic, ill-defined stakes. Like, what are the stakes in here? And just really near total abandonment of any kind of sign of narrative discipline. Dialogue oscillates between expositional over-explaining or just pedantic banter, and it never achieves any kind of earnestness that would draw us into the story. And when we got to the end, Gino, I felt to me, the movie felt more like a theme park attraction than a descent into the occult. And so,
I was going to say this is like a Marvel movie of a horror movie. This is like Marvel horror movie.
Yeah, I think the Conjuring universe would make for a fantastic Halloween Horror Nights house if an agreement between New Line and Universal could ever be reached. But I think that's its biggest strength, because it's driven by these jump scares. And listeners, you may have heard from cinephiles that all jump scares are bad, or you may hear from more kind of postmodern audiences that they like these jump scares. Well, there isn't anything innately wrong with a jump scare. The jump scare can be a very useful tool. However, when I describe problems with jump scares, and Gino, I think you're the same way, it's poorly planned, poorly placed, overly used jump scares that are not earned. You have these jump scares that aren't earned; they're just thrown in there, and then they're just the numbers are just off the charts. It's once we get into the second act, almost every 5 minutes we've got some kind of jump scare, and by then it's like I have no time for some emotional reset. And so you take this, what could be useful tool, and you abuse it. And when you use it over and over and over again, it doesn't work. It's like antibiotics. If you take too many antibiotics, if you're just taking and popping them every day, eventually those antibiotics or your body, they're not really going to work all that well, because you've taken so many of them that they no longer do what they're supposed to do, because they lose the effectiveness. And that's kind of like these movies, is that they're poorly planned, overly used, and they're just sloppy.
It's lazy writing. It really is. It's lazy writing. It's an attempt to scare without, writing the scare to just, startle. It's a startle and not a scare. But you know what? They can be effective. Look, we were talking about Jaws weeks ago. Yeah. The one where he goes under the water and the face comes up. That's a jump scare.
Yes, it is.
But it's a well-earned jump scare, and it's not abused.
Exactly. Or, one of my favorite jump scares of all time, Gino, is the one in the hospital in Exorcist Part 3. And so when you have the nurse checks the door, then walks across the hallway, then all of a sudden you have our big bad from Exorcist 3 come out with those giant scissors. And so that's an excellent jump scare. And it's one that you're not expecting it at all. Like you think you are, and then you let your guard down, and then it happens. Yeah. And that's when they are effective. Again, it's a moment that not only is jarring, it's a moment that is earned, and we're missing those earned opportunities. And you're right, Gino, it's lazy writing, because it's like, oh gosh, if I was a screenwriter, my story, is lacking right now. What am I going to do to keep the audience engaged? Oh, jump scare. Well, that's lazy. It's like, go back to the beginning and rework your story, because you don't want that jump scare to become a crutch, because it just doesn't. There's no emotional investment, and it even removes any rewatchability with it. And so,
well, that's definitely true. But you know what the problem is? It works for a lot of it, especially the younger audiences. That's what they go there for. I'm telling you, there are people who go there just for the jump scares. They'll leave the movie. You ask them what was it about. I don't know. They remember they jumped 16 times, and they want to scream. It's like being on a roller coaster. People want to scream. Yeah. So unfortunately, there's a large amount of audience that I think encourages this lazy writing and this stuff that, like you said, it kills rewatchability. It absolutely kills it, because you can't be jump scared twice. In the same spot. So it does kill that. But I think the young audience, because, as you have too, we go to the screenings of these things, and they're loving it. Mm-hmm. They'll scream and then they'll laugh about screaming. So I think that, unfortunately, their lazy writing gets rewarded by audience reaction, but it doesn't get rewarded by long-term, effectiveness.
Yeah. So while we're on the topic of jump scares in the movie, are there any in the movie that worked for you? Like, okay, that one was earned, that one worked. Can you identify any moments in the film that did work for you, that were reliant upon or driven mostly by the jump scare?
No, because I tell you, I don't do that. In fact, I have a running bet with one of the fellow critics who sits behind me a lot, John, and he swears that he's seen me jump. And I said, "Tell you what, I'll give you $50 if we're ever in a movie and you actually see me jump." Yeah. And I don't. For some reason, I don't know why I'm immune to them. They annoy me more than anything else. Yeah. I'm trying to get into the story. Stop trying to jump me by having some shadow jump out that turns out to be nothing really important or part of the thing. So no, I'm going to disappoint you. There wasn't a single jump scare in there that I went, oh, that really got me. I didn't jump once. Sorry.
Yeah, you know what, Gino? I can't think of one that made me jump either. And it's sad when you go see a movie, even one that you're, even tempered in expectations, but eager to go see it nevertheless, and then you leave the movie and like, what did I just watch? No, and it's just like, no, seriously, what did I just watch? I don't remember a thing that happened in the movie, because it's jump scare after jump scare. There's no story. And when you have all these unearned jump scares, they result in undermining the plot, they undermine any character development, and perhaps most egregiously at all, they undermine any thematic depth. There was a lot of opportunities in this movie to have thematic depth, particularly with the mother-daughter relationship, the father-daughter relationship. We've got this. It could have been a family drama disguised as a horror film. We've seen it done before, and I think we could have had something very similar to that here in this film. I feel that the movie, initially anyway, and I mentioned this earlier in the hour, that it initially tries to align itself with classics like The Exorcist to whatever degree, albeit small. But it ultimately retreats into this predictable franchise-level spectacle. Is or would the movie be better served by embracing traditional supernatural horror tropes or plots, or leading into what it's created in its own universe? Because I think part of the problem here is it is reliant upon its own universe. It's not channeling excellence from outside of its universe, and so it's only concerned with what it has established, not looking to other films for guidance. So what are your thoughts on the film and how it retreats into this franchise level spectacle?
And I think that's true. And as I mentioned before, far too much use of Annabelle. It's like, okay, we've had the Annabelle thing. Why we keep bringing it up? Because they think that that's what people are going there to watch. They want to see these familiar things. And you're right. It keeps them from doing something entirely new. And in this film, they could have, like you said, and I've said, if they'd have limited this film, told the intimate story of the immediate family, these 4 people against this demonic thing, that could have been really, really good. It could have been very creepy, but you're right. We had to show the room, with the stuff in it. It's like there's these things that they have these boxes that they have to check off to serve the franchise, and that hurts it as a film because, okay, I don't need these boxes checked off. I want this to scare me on its own. I want to get, I want to get immersed in this story.
Yeah.
But this franchise, more than most, relies on tropes that they started from the first one, and we're just gonna, it's mandatory. If the script doesn't have this checked off, it's probably abandoned.
Yeah, I'd say it's also guilty of having an over-reliance on CGI ghosts.
Oh, yeah, at the end, this one.
Yeah,
terrible.
And I'd say that over-reliance is really the final nail in the coffin of this movie and the universe, where practical effects, could have imbued the film with some texture, some tangibility, and some dread. We're just instead subjected to a parade of the same vapid CGI, weightless apparitions that we've had before, and without giving away into spoilers too much.
Right.
There is, I do want to bring up this scene, and it's not going to ruin it for anybody that hasn't seen the movie. And you know what scene I'm talking about, Gino. It's the scene in which Lorraine is staring into her sink as she's doing dishes, and it begins to overflow with blood.
Oh, the blood.
If Kubrick could pull off the bloody elevator scene in The Shining, this movie could have used practical effects for this scene. If no other scene, you could have used practical effects for the blood that is just gushing out of the sink. And I'm not suggesting that practical effects alone would have saved the soul of this movie, but an increase in the degree to which practical and mechanical effects were integrated into the narrative certainly would have helped the movie feel more tangible. Those jump scares are just, they're almost like obstacles that are in the way of telling a better story. And so by the time we get to the third act, nearly every scene and sequence, has some kind of lazy CGI. But, I mean, what did you think about that? Even a scene like that, Gino, it's just like, that would have been the cheapest practical effect you would have had in the movie, too. But why do you think that they use CGI at that sink instead of just filling it with blood?
Well, 2 things. I think, again, laziness, even though, like you said, it wouldn't be that hard to do. That's an easy practical effect to set up. Yeah, that's exactly right. We could set that effect up. But, again, I think it's, audience expectations. There are too many that are in, I'd say, the younger part of the people that are watching this movie, that's what they're looking for. They want to see CGI. They want to see cartoons. They want to see a video game in their movie. Most of us don't, and I think that's why we're not going to see many of the classic kind of things that we saw at one time, because we can do too much, and people expect that too much now.
Yeah.
I think if Kubrick would have made The Shining now, even if he'd have done that practically, there would have been people say, oh, well, you know what, that would have looked so much cooler if he'd have put, they'd have had it as a CGI. You and I know that's not true.
You're killing me here, Gino.
You and I know that's not true, but I'll tell you what, you ask a lot of people out there, and they will tell you that they love the CGI stuff. But the problem is, for me, it wasn't very good CGI.
No, it wasn't.
At the end. That's been happening with Marvel, too. CGI is getting lazy, too, where they're not even going all the way through with it. They're like, well, we'll set it up and just show it, and they're going to just accept it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm getting jaded. It's just me getting jaded, perhaps.
Yeah, I think to your point, and I mentioned this before we go into our next break, there's something you said a moment ago that, and I know we're kind of stereotyping, but younger audiences going into the movie are more likely to enjoy or like or sing the praises of CGI, and not only this movie, but in others. I think of it this way, that if you're only served, we'll say cheese pizza. Okay, so you're only ever served cheese pizza. Cheese pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner all the time. You're only ever served cheese pizza. Well, what are you going to crave? You're going to crave cheese pizza because that is the only thing you know. That is the only thing to which you have been exposed. So that is what you come to expect. That is what you come to like. But if you would introduce say pepperoni pizza, then, ooh, now you're actually showing the person who has ingested all this cheese pizza there are better pizzas out there that have many more flavors in them, that have more dimension to them. And so if you're only ever served that one thing, of course all you're ever going to want is that one thing. So I think on one hand, you're right, Gino, that is why we hear a lot of younger audience members, say that they would rather see something in CGI because largely that's all they know. And so if filmmakers were to be more bold and lean into the practical and mechanical, you never know. We may just be able to turn the Titanic around before it strikes that iceberg. You're listening to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by returning guest and friend of the show, film critic Gino Sassani. This hour we are talking about The Conjuring Last Rites, the latest and perhaps final installment in the Ed and Lorraine cinematic stories captured by the Conjuring universe of movies. When we come back, Gino and I will wrap up our discussion on Last Rites and then talk about some of our favorite supernatural horror films. You can join our conversation on air this hour by calling 850-772-6803, or you can text the show at 850-329-8936. We'll be right back after this break.
On This Old House Radio Hour, can the bright paint color change your mood? The science says yes, and we'll tell you how to make it happen at home.
Color, it actually hits our brains before we even are conscious about it, drawing out our emotions and our memories.
Plus, Mike and Molly Starr and comedian Billy Gardell shares what home means to him and his family. That's this week on This Old House Radio Hour, supported by the Home Depot. Here at Wednesdays at noon on 90.7 FM, WKGC, Panama City.
Hi, this is WKGC Chef Chris, host of Doing Dinner. Every Thursday, I teach you how to create a different themed dinner party that your guests will find deliciously fun. You can also call to join me on air to ask me any questions about this week's dinner party or anything else culinary or hospitality on your mind. In case you can't listen live, you can also listen later through your favorite podcast service. Let's create an experience together. Doing Dinner, Thursdays at noon on 90.7 WKGC.
Welcome back to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by returning guest and friend of the show, film critic Gino Sassani. We are wrapping up our discussion on The Conjuring Last Rites, the latest and perhaps final installment in the Warren saga, now in cinemas nationwide. And then we're going to talk about some of our favorite supernatural horror films. You can call the show, 850-772-6803, or if it's more convenient to text the show, you can do that at 850-329-8936. The movie is framed as the Warrens' last case, suggesting emotional and narrative stakes like we've never seen before in the franchise. Cue the laughter. Does this final installment in the film, the finality of this installment, does it bring meaningful closure, Gino, to the characters and story arc, or does it feel forced into service of the marketing aspect of the final chapter? What are your thoughts?
I don't think it's the last one. I don't think they even intended to be the last one. But, I'm a person who's actually been to 3 different Elton John farewell tours over the decades. So, that trope works. The idea that this is the last one. I don't believe it for a second. And they don't, and if you watch the movie, they don't even make it look that way. I mean, they talk about almost like a rebirth. Now suddenly they're saying, yes, we don't turn our backs on anyone. Mm-hmm. So that tells me they're going to keep going as well as the kid now. So no, I don't think this is it. I don't think it's remotely it. I would be very surprised there was another one out in 2 or 3 years.
Now that comedian Matt Rife has purchased the Warrens' real-life house, including that room in Connecticut, Gino, do you think we're going to somehow get a screenplay from comedian Matt Rife with this material from The Conjuring?
Oh, God, I hope not. I mean, we might, but
you never know. It's just like of all the houses you could have purchased, it's just like with all the cursed objects, like the room, it's all there. He bought. I think it just happened 2 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago. He recently bought the house, so I don't know. Now he may want to cut if we're like including these cursed objects. Who knows? but maybe he will just contribute to the Scary Movie version. We're getting the reboot of Scary Movie later on this year, or is it next year? I think they made the announcement here recently. So maybe he'll be involved in the parody version of the Conjuring. But that's very interesting. The comedian, having purchased that house.
Well, that's the parody movie right there. A guy, an idiot purchases the house that doesn't understand what's going on here. I'm not calling him an idiot, but I mean, that's the movie. I mean, it writes itself. There's the parody right there.
Yeah. When I saw, I don't know if it was The Conjuring or it may have been one of the later movies. We'll say it's The Conjuring. I think we do see the Warrens' cursed object room in that. I thought the way this franchise is going to go was a movie based upon each of those different cursed objects.
That's what I thought.
We get that samurai all the time. I want to see the movie that features that samurai. Like, I'm fascinated by that samurai armor every time we see the cursed object room, and there's so many other objects that are in there that I thought that, even if it included the Warrens, but whether it did or didn't, I thought that was going to be our universe, was going through many of these different objects, and you get to see the story associated with it, like Annabelle Creation, like The Nun, not the Nun we got, but a better version. But you would go through the room, and your movie is built around these different objects. I thought that's the direction we were going to go, but obviously that's not the way. That's not the way we went. Imagine
having a series where you've got this place that has all these cursed objects, and we tell a different story about each object.
Great idea.
It was called Friday the 13th, the series.
Oh, I never saw Friday the 13th. I'm aware of its existence, but
That's what that was about.
Saw that.
It was about these different items in this antique place, and each episode was one of these antiques and the cursed story behind it.
So would you say it's similar to Rod Sterling's Night Gallery? Was it kind of a long
I guess because he used the paintings thing, but in here it was actually an object. This guy had these weird curios, like an old curio shop. And each episode told about some actual object and how it became to be cursed, or what its very horrific and unfortunate story happened to be, and for the people, obviously, that came in contact with it.
Interesting.
So, that's been around for quite a while, that idea. But I agree with you. That's what if you would have watched The Conjuring, that's what I would have thought we'd come up with, too. Especially after Annabelle came out. I said, okay, here, they're starting with the big one.
Yeah.
But then they just kept going with the same ones over and over and over again.
We've been comparing and contrasting Last Rites to past horror films, and with the time we have remaining in the show, Gino, I think it's a great time to talk about some of our favorite supernatural movies. Perhaps those that feature hauntings or possessions or other forms of supernatural warfare, kind of in the same vein. So, what's one of the titles that you have for us today, Gino?
Well, the obvious one has to be The Exorcist. I was 13 when I saw that in the movies the first time, and to this day, I don't think that there's been a movie that affected me as much as that one has. Maybe because I was young, but that movie still gives me a little bit of creeps, and very few movies do that. So they're still trying to make it. They're still trying to hit that.
They have, and we've even had attempts at directly capturing what William Friedkin did with The Exorcist in 1973. And still to this day, it is the best example of the possession subgenre of horror. Not only was it one of the most profitable horror films of all time, it remains timeless. And it's now been around for 50 years. 50 years now. And so, but it's the definitive possession horror film. And I love how it takes the concept of the external monster and moves it into the mind and body of a little girl. In many ways, Linda Blair's Reagan, she takes the psychosocial horror of Psycho and combines it with a classic monster approach that we have in that we had mid-century, and then we throw in a dash of Rosemary's Baby. So we're taking all these different excellent ingredients and putting that in there. Exorcist was also on my list, but while you mention it, Rosemary's Baby also was going to be one of mine. So Gino, what are some of the reasons why you like and selected Rosemary's Baby as one of your favorite examples?
I think the thing with Rosemary's Baby is Rosemary's Baby seems to come the closest to just a normal-looking movie about normal folks where this supernatural thing comes into it. Mm-hmm. And that makes it so much real, because then you're thinking, well, there's nothing particularly different or exotic about these people, and here we are, you know. Yeah. And just the idea, you know, the problem with demonic possession stuff, that stuff scares me because, you know, that could be real.
Yes.
You know, monsters, okay, but that's something where part of you goes, you know, I'm a Catholic from a young kid, and some of you goes, you know what? You know, that scares me because you're like, you know, maybe this could really happen. So that possibly is why those are my favorite.
Yeah, and you're right. It is real. Like you know, I'm like you, Gino. I fully believe that does exist out there. And I think, you know, where Last Rites also gets it wrong is on its handling of spiritual warfare. You know, while the Conjuring verse has historically dabbled in theological and metaphysical ideas, the film we talked about today, it's a curious exploration at best, and it's at times borderlining on ignorance. Themes of faith and redemption and evil are reduced to these just ornamental set dressing rather than being woven meaningfully into the narrative. And even fundamental tenets of spiritual warfare are just ignored. And so why Rosemary's Baby works, why Exorcist works, is that they handled, you know, these ideas with reverence. They handle these elements of the storytelling with reverence, and it upholds the stakes. It raises them even because it does feel real. And so Friedkin did it, and Roman Polanski did it, and Rosemary's Baby. So we have directors that are handling these dimensions with reverence and gravity, whereas in a lot of modern horror films, including today's, they're just clumsily exploited for empty shocks. So I find that it lowers the tension, it lowers the suspense, it lowers the stakes, and so if you're going to include this in your horror film, at least go back and brush up on the fundamental tenets that you find in spiritual warfare. For example, we're told in Scripture, demons tremble at His name. Okay, when's the last time you saw a horror film in which that was actually true? It's oftentimes ignored. So just these basic tenets are fundamentally ignored. But Exorcist did it right. Rosemary's Baby did it right. Both of those are on my list. We still got a few more minutes here. Another one that I had on my list, Gino, and maybe you have it on yours. Because those two are probably ones that a lot of people would cite, but I got a couple for you that I know you will appreciate. One of them is 1963's The Haunting and 1976's Burnt Offerings with Bette Davis. And so both of those are fantastic. If you enjoy horror films, listeners, check out the original Haunting from 1963. And
The Haunting definitely on my list.
And Burnt Offerings from 76. So what do you like? What do you like about our original Haunting, Gino?
Well, just atmosphere. You want to bring somebody in, give me something atmospheric, immerse me into this world, make me feel like, you know, I'm surrounded by what's going on. And I think The Haunting is one of the most atmospheric films I've ever seen.
Yeah, and it's a precursor to not only the remake of The Haunting 30 years later, but it's also a precursor to your haunted house movies in general. We could go really far back to The Dark House, but I'd say it's really more of The Haunting that is the precursor to our horror films. Burnt Offerings I like because it did things that we would see in both Poltergeist and The Shining way later on, except Burnt Offerings, Dan Curtis's Burnt Offerings in 76 is doing it, in which we have the house is the entity, and we see very little. So much is suggested, kind of like in The Haunting. We see very little. A lot of it is in suggestion, which is why they are rewatchable, because it is tapping into a feeling. It's tapping into the chemicals racing through your body, and that's why those are still rewatchable today. Do you have any others you want to mention on your list today, Gino?
Well, yeah, almost anything done by Val Lewton. Again, going way back. Again, because he was a master of atmosphere.
Yes.
It didn't matter necessarily what the supernatural subject was. It was just tremendous atmosphere. Those are the things that get me. But also in this genre, close to this genre, I like the original Omen. I'm not really happy about all the sequels and such, but the original Omen, there are some great moments in that film.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the new one, I thought actually the new one was pretty good as sequels go, but I was not into the one with Grant from Jurassic Park was in 3, I think that was, and the second one. But that first Omen, man, that was a great, and that brought in the political intrigue. What if the devil was going to become the president of the United States someday?
Yeah, a lot of people forget that Sam Neill makes appearances in the Omen. He's also in 97's Event Horizon, or 98 Event Horizon.
The worst movie ever made.
Great in horror films. And so I like seeing Sam Neill in there. I'd be remiss though, Gino, if I did not mention Poltergeist. So it's on my watch list every Halloween season, which will be kicking off here pretty soon. And
what gets you about Poltergeist? Because for some reason that one never got me. I mean,
really?
I understand it's a big film, but that one never really. I don't know. That one never did anything for me. So tell me what you love about that movie.
Sure. What I love about Poltergeist is it pulls on the brilliant directing skills of two of our greatest directors of the modern era, both Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper. Listeners, if you don't know, even though Tobe Hooper receives the director's credit, Steven Spielberg was very much involved in the film. So I like to think of Poltergeist as being directed by both Spielberg and Hooper, each of them contributing to the overall success of Poltergeist. 1982, it is over 40 years old now, and what I like about it is it still holds up today very well, but it's a family drama that's it's disguised as this supernatural movie. And we are vested into these characters. We are rooting for their survival, and it is incredibly eerie. We have it takes the haunted house subgenre up to the next level. The storytelling and cinematic elements aside, another primary reason that I really like this film, Gino, is that it holds this intrigue because it's connected to this lore in the film that kind of exists in real life, because we've heard the stories about be careful where you build your house, what was there before you were building your house, and so it taps into this real fear that exists in the cultural zeitgeist. And I think for audiences in 82 and perhaps to this very day watching the film, we may those that are watching it, myself included, find ourselves venturing into a haunted house on a dare, not in no small part because of this movie. And so I like that it has the substance, but then all around the substance we have some excellent use of effects in the movie. And it also it's taken up to that point, haunted houses were always in scary places, and now it's a haunted house in your suburban neighborhood. So a haunted house may not be way out in the countryside. Perhaps the haunted house could be located next to you. That is, if your neighborhood is also built upon an ancient burial ground.
Hard to watch though because of the kid. Because of the true life situation with the girl, I guess. So maybe that was a little too. Maybe that's always cut a little too home for me, and I don't remember it from before that happened.
Well, as much fun as I know we could continuing down this road, Gino, I am afraid that we're at the end of the show today. As always, thanks for joining us on Real Talk. Where can listeners find out more about you and your music?
Well, music
and
they
your
can go
film
to.
reviews. Yeah.
Yeah, music they can go to Facebook/GE Sassani or GESassani.com. For reviews, they can go to upcomingdiscs.com, no K at the end, DISCS.
Excellent. If you missed any of today's episode or to listen to past episodes of Real Talk or other shows on WKGC, we are on a podcatcher near you. Just search for WKGC Public Media on your podcast service of choice. I will be at Halloween Horror Nights with Gino this upcoming weekend, so I will not be in studio next Monday. But don't worry, you'll still be able to join cinematic conversations frame by frame nevertheless. Stay tuned for Jazz in a Minor Key with Walter Hale coming up next. Thanks to all of you for listening. I hope you'll tune in again next week, same time, same place, for more Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC.
You're listening to 90.7 FM WKGC, Panama City.